Hello, everyone. My name is Ekaterina Kardakova. I'm an opera singer, voice and public speaking coach, but also, as you know, I'm a founder of Creative Tech Lab. And today I have a very interesting guest in my interview row. I invited Else van der Berg. She is the strategic consultant and the founder of Sunder House to talk about the target group because, as you know, I am working on my startup. You've seen my videos on YouTube, you read my newsletters and all my social media. You know that what I'm doing. And as a for many startuppers or business people, the most important question is where to find and how to define your target group, with whom to communicate, who is your client. And I'm not the only one who asked this question. That's why when I met Elsa, I almost immediately said, please, can we do the interview? Because it's so important. And could you, I asked Elsa to share her experiences because Elsa is working with many startups and knows for sure how to find your audience. So Elsa, thank you so much for your time and for coming. I'm very excited about this interview. And of course, my first question is actually how did you create your own startup, the Sunder House, and why actually you choose the strategic consultant? Because there are so many different areas in business. Why is this?
Thank you firstly for having me. I'm really excited to talk about something that I am very passionate about. So for me, it's great. I spent about 12 years working in startups and scale-ups in Berlin, like always permanently employed in all kinds of different roles. And any company that I joined, they kind of had the same problems coming over and over again. So I think maybe you guys are familiar with it. Often customer acquisition costs were quite high. Customer churn was also quite high, so lifetime value was quite low. I'm quite familiar with businesses in the online space who would spend about maybe 50 to 100 euros to acquire a customer, and then in the end making maybe 20 to 50 euros out of them. So the math simply being broken. This is not uncommon. A lot of people I tell this, they are like, wow, it can't be, but it really is. I've also seen a lot of companies struggling simply to get customers to buy their product. Sales conversations being almost painful with begging people to please try it for free. I've seen companies get stuck in price wars with competitors. And also I've seen companies that did quite well in the beginning, but then kind of plateaued with their revenues. So I saw all of these kind of symptoms occurring over and over and again. And
In terms in what kind of niche are they working? What kind of no, not you, but your companies you were working with.
all kinds of different, and this is the issue, like they were completely different. There were B2B, B2C, mobility providers, fintech, fast moving consumer goods, all kinds of different companies. And in the end, I started thinking a lot about why does this keep happening? And I think it usually came down to the same problem, with the fact that companies failed to build something that people really want and that they want to tell others about. So in my last employments, I always kept focusing on this problem, which I think is the problem of product market fit, which comes down, I started thinking about this a lot and a lot and a lot, which comes down to, well, if you want to build something that people really love, you have to understand who those people are. So it kind of comes down to finding the right target audience. And this is something that I saw a lot of companies have in common, that they say, we serve people who eat food. Very broad. We serve women. Very broad. And if you do that, you come into a space where you're competing with everybody who serves food or everybody who does something for women. And because you're not niche enough or you're not specific enough about your target audience, you're not going to do anything that makes somebody super excited, because your target audience is just so broad. You have to do a myriad of features. You're probably going to have to build a very big product with like 1,000 features, because everybody wants something else within that very broad segment. So this is kind of the thing I kept bumping into. And I completely understand why businesses get it wrong, because and this is something that also came forward in the last months when I've started talking to first-time founders. A lot of people come to me with, I can do this thing, or I have this idea and I want to do it, and who can I sell it to? And this is really the wrong way around. Like there's this very nice analogy that I've used a million times. I stole it from Seth Godin about the key and the lock. What you can do is, of course, you can build a very nice key and then you can run around the world and look for a lock that you can open with it. And chances are that it's not really going to work out because you won't find that lock. What's way more sensible is to identify the lock that you want to open first and then build a key for that. It sounds very obvious, but again, in the past months, the conversation that I've had is often, I've done this thing, I want to do this thing, who can I sell it to? So the trick is to kind of turn your mind upside down and think about, who do I really want to service? And when you do that exercise, you have to think about a group that is special in a sense, right? So that you can do something for them that they don't have yet. So you can solve a pain point for them in a way that it isn't done yet, which allows you to be completely different from your competition because you're just radically distant rather than just slightly different, right? And then, of course, the problem or the key is to understand that target audience once you've identified them. So this is kind of why I started Sonderhaus, because I saw a lot of companies struggle with this, like firstly, find the right target audience and move away from being sales driven, sell to anyone, to customer driven. And then the second big problem, understanding what these people really want. Because the old fashioned methods that I was familiar with in my earlier years were basically ask the customer, right? Focus groups, surveys, qualitative interviews, also expert interviews, desktop research. This is all very nice and helpful. And I think it's really good to help you formulate your first assumptions, but it is not proof. Because I think proof is only what you see in the real world, what really happens. So this is kind of why I founded Sonderhaus as a collective of freelancers, where I also work with a branding and storytelling expert who helps us get the message right, and also a behavioral scientist, because it's very much about understanding what people want based on how they really behave. So we help you kind of make your assumptions about your target audience explicit, firstly, because you already have some ideas, so that you can test them in a very structured way and that you can understand how they actually behave and interpret that. So yeah, that was longer than expected, but
from my experience, it's very important to analyze how people behave, especially if it's something innovative and people don't know about it. This is my challenge to communicate about the education technologies, because people don't know. They think like, oh, what? No, perhaps this is something bad. Yeah. So to get the right message, that's true. Okay, but what is exactly the Sonderhaus? It's a group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a pool of experts, and for example, I can come to you and you can create for me what?
So it depends on the maturity stage of your company, of course. So I'm now assuming early stage startups, because that's kind of the audience that you were talking about. We also service scale ups and more mature companies, because just very quickly, I feel like it's a little bit of a myth that product market fit is something that you just solve in the beginning. I hear this myth of, we did an MVP phase and now we cracked product market fit and now it's going to be great and we never have to think about it again. I think that's very much a myth, right? I think even if you think about maybe big companies or the fancy, the cool scale-ups that you worked with or for, if they were to ask themselves now, do people really love our product? It's still a difficult question to answer, I think. So I think it's a continuous exercise. But now, for now, I'll focus on the early stage startups because I think that fits more for you. Sorry, what was your question again? Sorry.
What is the Sonderhaus? But I have another question. Let's do step by step. For example, from the idea, the person got the idea, get the idea. I would like to do this, and I would like to find my audience, my target group. What is the first step? Where to find this locker?
So I think the first step is, because the people, when they come to me, they already have assumptions in their head. And these assumptions are just floating around in their brain. So I think the first thing is to write things down. And so I use a template myself, a target audience description, where you describe in detail in a one pager, you write it down. Who are they? What do they believe? How do they view the world? What do they value? I think values are very important. I've seen a lot of people describe target audience more like the personas, as in females between 30 and 35 who live in Berlin. I think this has no meaning, right? I think you need to focus very much on psychology. And then you also don't have to say it has to be females, right? It can be men and women, children who all value the same thing. So I think I want to shift way more to the psychology of the target audience and away from the demographics. Demographics can come later when you set up maybe a marketing campaign, right? So that's the first step, is kind of to outline the assumptions that you have, write them down, and then also understand which of these you're quite sure about, maybe because you've done some research, you've had some conversations, and some of these are complete wildcards, right? You still really need to test them. And then when you've outlined your target audiences, like an early stage startup, I would never say, right now you have to pick one niche and that's your niche forever, marry it now. Because you just don't have real world learnings, right? This is the phase to experiment with multiple segments. So what you do is you write out your segments. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 5, I don't know. And then you rank them. So I use also a worksheet that startups can use to rank them on the right criteria and also weight these criteria. So a little tip, like some things that are important are, of course, the level of pain that they are in now, that they cannot be out. If the pain is not high enough, you don't really have a strong value proposition. Also important is the group self-referencing, which kind of comes again with this idea of being a big fish in a small pond. If you target a group that is maybe already connected and that talk to each other and that exchange tips about buying decisions, that's nice. If it's a group that is very similar but not yet connected, maybe there's an opportunity for you to build a community around that and establish this connection that they really need, right? So you have to kind of think about these network effects from the start. So these are kind of points that you use to rank your target audiences. Then maybe you come out with 3 really great ones and 6 that go in the icebox for now. And then you can start testing, right? And so in these audience descriptions, you've also probably written out which channels they convene at, online, offline. Are they on Instagram? Are they the kind of people who would even click on an ad? Are they people who go to local coffee shops? I don't know, right? So you kind of outline the channels, you outline what they value. And then we would also help you set up the right messaging, set up the right channels. Here, of course, the branding and storytelling expert can come in. And I can also help you set up tooling to help you understand which channels are good. Because this is another thing that I've seen go wrong so many times. And also a problem that startups come with. They have a million ideas and a million things they want to do. And they just kind of start doing them at random. But that's why this exercise of making things explicit is so important, so that you can be very conscious about your own bias and be very conscious about the steps you want to take. And you can set up tooling to measure the actual conversion, right? You're not just going to set up 3 different campaigns and kind of look at it and hope, okay, I think I know now which one was better. You need to measure everything. So you need to set up the tooling to measure the conversion rates, funnel time, per source, right? So we can also help you with this entire value chain.
This is already the first step. But can I tell you about my experience? Because I was in a business startup accelerator, and of course, this is the first step. What everyone does in the accelerator, and the very first step when you start from idea and trying to realize this idea. And interestingly, that I'm pretty sure that mostly people, when they think this template of the ideal, how they always say, just to write a portrait of your ideal client and to write the portrait with whom you would like to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you start to find these people, or start to think like, where can I find these people? But after a while, I understood that it's all about also competition, because the second exercise is, who's your competition? Analyze your competitors. And competitors, if you sell to anyone, can be anyone, right? At the beginning, when you are, you have to define, it's a kind of, target group is your diamond, and you are starting to, to give it a form. I call it like this, yeah, and communicate with this form. And the thing is that what I experienced is that it took me a while to understand that my people are the people with the same values, what you just briefly said. And I think that many startups, but also big companies, they always, the main point is, what is the pain But many, for example, if you are working in services, for example, I am selling my public speaking trainings, yeah.
Mm.
Not the apps product, but public speaking trainings. Many people think that they're great in communication and they're great in public speaking, and then you say like, well, why can you sell them if you're so great? I mean, many people don't realize the pain, but they have the same values. And I think that this identifying point from what kind of values my clients should have, and they are actually always the same with my values, or with the values of the company, or the values the company should or want to communicate with the client.
And I think what you just said is very interesting also about competitive differentiation, because I think that's kind of the next phase for me that comes in also the first few weeks, right? Is because now you've written out values, because you've done these target audience descriptions, and they might be professionality, trendiness, cutting edge technology, reliability, whatever, right? Whatever, sustainability, whatever people value. And then I really like an exercise that was actually from Seth Godin, who does this thing called value plotting, where you create maps with a y-axis and an x-axis, and you put values on each axis, and then you can plot competitors on this map. And what you often see is exactly what you're saying, is that there are corners. Where you want to land, of course, is in the upper right corner, where you have extremes, right? You're the most trendy and the most reliable, kind of. And then you see who else is there. And there's a lot of common claims like high quality, great service levels that a lot of competitors are using. And I also read this very nice book by, I think, Jack Trout, the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, where one of his laws is don't use values or don't use statements that everybody's using or can use, right? And these are like the typical ones that everybody's shouting about. You can use them if you can prove them. If you can prove them based on what customers have said, right? Not something that you think you have the best quality, but if you want a prize that was elected by all the customers who say you have the best quality, okay, then go ahead. But in most cases, it's not the best value. You want to pick two values where you're kind of alone in that corner, so that you're the only clear and obvious choice for people who value that stuff. So I think that's kind of what you did as well, right? That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Seth Godin. I really like him.
Yeah.
I also like what he is saying. But the thing is that where to find the people with the same values?
So this depends entirely, right? So this depends completely on a case-to-case basis. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all for that. So I think what you've done the mapping, you found the values. You still have these early assumptions a little bit about who they are, right? So you can kind of plaster all of that together. But again, you just have to have assumptions at this point. It's time to test it and see if it works. And I think the first 6 months to a year to actually the entire business life cycle are about testing and adjusting and understanding whether you were right and finding where your target audience convenes. So that's why I say let's start with the top 3 target audience scenarios. We test them. So we test their channels. Each target audience might have 5 channels, right? So that gives you 15 different campaigns to run. And so based on that, you can see what is true, what is right? You can only have assumptions, which you can base on desktop research or conversations, but you need to try it in real life to really learn where they convene, what works. And the cool thing when you're in an early stage startup, and especially when you try to foster a one-on-one relationship with your prospects, which is something I'm also a pretty big fan of, you can try very outlandish stuff, right? You can be very creative. You are not a big incumbent with an existing brand that you cannot tarnish, right? You can try all kinds of value propositions based on your assumptions to see what really works. It's a bit of magic as well. It's not all logic.
Yeah, because I think that business is psychology anyway. So it's very interesting to analyze and observe the behavior of the customers,
Yeah.
all the customers, because they're really different. At least I'm working on. So, but let's also come to the interesting question. I think that okay, the second step when you find your target group is the communication. how to communicate with them. Because sometimes what I experience, sometimes people are getting a little bit aggressive. They're not always nice. They're not always wanted to get information or communicate. How to build this right communication?
So I think that's super interesting. I think also a lot of people that I've been talking to have similar business models to yours, where they're not just selling toothpaste, right? They're selling something that is maybe complicated, that requires trust. I've worked with a lot of tech startups and scale-ups who are doing something disruptive or discontinuous technology, as others would call it. So something new that requires maybe some education. And that's exactly what you say. What is important is that you start a dialogue, right? Because it's not possible for you to put one banner on Facebook with a buy now button and people are going to click and buy. There needs to be a dialogue. There needs to be trust gained. And there, what I love about business and love about these problems is that it's not about math. It's about human psychology, right? As you say, it's sometimes human behavior that is very unexpected. People get aggressive or people get delighted. You really don't know. So again, it depends on your target audience. No one size fits all answer. It's a lot of testing and adjusting. Of course, if you have one person who's aggressive, it might be an outlier. But if it's a pattern, it might be something you want to look into. One thing that I really like, I'll fall back on Seth Godin again, why not? He coined this term called permission marketing, which is about moving away from this traditional interruption marketing, which is what I just outlined, this idea of having a banner ad that says buy now, or a poster or a big TV commercial or cold calling, basically interrupting people and trying to steal their attention to get them to buy now. And permission marketing is more about trying to get people to volunteer to start a dialogue. So yeah, the way to do this again is starting from the very niche target audience. So you pick the people who want to hear from you and you have to deliver them value every step of the way. So you have a dialogue with maybe a funnel of 5-6 conversations. I don't know. You can do it in multiple ways. You can start, for example, a drip campaign. What is important then, of course, is that you put even your target audience people into cohorts, segments, so that you can feed them information that is relevant and personal, and of course anticipated because they volunteered. They said, yes, you can talk to me. But what is important is that in every conversation, you need to offer them something of value. There has to be a reward in it for them. The other day I was reading a business plan, like a standard business plan, and there also the marketing strategy was described, and I kind of had to laugh because the market strategy was, I get a list of people to call, I'll send them my offering, and then I'm going to call them every week to ask, are you going to buy it now? Are you going to buy it now? And I just think you haven't offered them anything, right? You have given nothing of value. So I think that comes back to this exercise of finding the right audience, zooming in on them and understanding what is of value of them, right? So that you can deliver that value throughout the conversation and kind of deepen this level of permission. So maybe you start with a lead generation form and you say, hey, sign up for a free app for your kid, right? Like a low entry barrier, something that's cheap for you to make, or an ebook on how tech is good for kids, whatever they might be interested in, right? I'm thinking maybe the free app is cooler than the ebook about tech. I don't know. And you kind of upgrade. So maybe you end after giving them 3 valuable things. Hey, can we jump on a call now? Then you can talk and maybe finally after 5-6 conversations start pitching what you're actually doing, right? I think the killer is to go in for the sale too soon, where a lot of people will disagree with me. A lot of people are saying, don't waste your time, just go in for the kill. I've seen people do that and have conversion rates of maybe 1 or 2% with cold calling and trying to sell immediately. This slower way of doing it can be painful because it takes a long time and you don't know if it's going to work out, right? You're just investing all of this time and effort and you don't know. But the conversion rates, if you get it right, if you adjust it enough, if you test enough, you can go up to 50%. I think you mentioned you have a newsletter with very high open rates, very much above industry level. I think you've done that by continuously adjusting your content to make sure that you deliver something that people want to read. and not trying to sell every time. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me it's very important about to make this trust level very high. For me, because I also think that people who come to me, I know they are like me, they have the same values. So when I go somewhere and buy some course, for example, or training, I really want to get the feeling. For me personally, it's very important that this person and the team cares about the customer. So it's very important to do this very, not aggressive dialogue, because I know that, for example, a male world, they really like bing, 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 advertisement, advertisement, and I'm always, putting on YouTube. Stop this! This is too repetitive, too repetitive. I'm tired of this person. I don't want to get the advertisement from him anymore. Please stop it. Yeah. Anyway. Very
This is
interesting.
offensive guy. I have him too. He comes to my YouTube as well. I'm like, guy, back off.
Yeah, very different ways. I think that women do it generally differently, more with content and networking and conversations. It's the
But I
female.
also think that the world is changing, because I feel like because I've been in many B2B businesses, right? Throughout the last 10 years. And when I worked for a B2B business 5 years ago, we were using LinkedIn InMail, and it was relatively new and we got a lot of responses. And now it's dead. It's the same as cold calling. Because people see the InMail logo and they think, oh, this is spam. Nobody reacts anymore. So I think what happens with interruption marketing is that marketers find a new spot to do it, right? Like a new corner of a billboard where you can put a little poster, or, oh, we can use LinkedIn InMail, or we can use WhatsApp, or we can use Telegram. And maybe for 5 minutes it works because it's new. And then people get tired of it. I've seen this one metric, which is already from decades ago, that people see about 3,000 marketing messages every day. I think at the moment it's even more. And I know from myself, and I know from everybody around me, men and women alike, that we're just ignoring them fully. We got very good at filtering them out. I think if you ask people what are the last 5 ads that you've seen, they will have a hard time telling you. And if you ask them, did you buy any of those products, it will be no. So I think it's not even just male versus female. It's just the world is changing and people are just sick and tired of their attention being stolen and getting nothing in return. So it's just about changing the paradigm. And that's kind of why I picked also the name Sonder House. I like this term Sonder, which means that it's kind of the moment that you realize that everybody around you has an internal life that is as rich and conflicted as your own. And this is something I think businesses need to learn. It's not okay to just thrust your advertisement into their face and just steal their time and their attention, right? You have to have an honest, trusted relationship, build a relationship, have a dialogue that people want to have. So, yeah,
But this is
I
also
think we're aligned.
very interesting topic. What kind of tendency you see in marketing? Because as you said, also the concurrence is based on getting attention of the clients, and it doesn't work anymore because people are overloaded with these, interruptions. What are the tendencies?
So I think I had also a different question, which is similar, because I think a tendency is I hear a lot more people talking about permission marketing or talking about doing these long-term connections, which also isn't for every business model, right? It works especially if you have a higher lifetime value, if it makes sense to invest in the customer acquisition period. And it makes a lot of sense if you need to build trust anyway. If it's maybe more complicated, it requires education. And of course, it makes sense if you don't already have a huge brand. If you're Coca-Cola, you don't need to do this, basically, right? You're already golden. And also, if you're selling a tube of toothpaste, you also don't need to have a 5 email curriculum about it. I got it. I'll just buy it or not. So it depends a little bit on what kind of business model you have. But one thing that I have seen in terms of tendencies and what people have asked me, because as I said in the beginning, I see so many, especially online businesses, tech businesses, who are using online advertising, so using platforms to advertise, giving a lot of money to Facebook and LinkedIn and Google to acquire customers. and the math doesn't make sense, right? You have funnels where you have this many clicks and maybe this many customers come out and nobody's ever coming back. The math just doesn't make sense, right? The acquisition cost is much, much higher than the lifetime value of the customer. So why do they do it, right? So, and I think that's kind of the tendency thing. I think that has a lot to do with habits and has a lot to do with maybe FOMO, with looking at companies around and thinking, yeah, but what happens if we stop doing it? Will we lose all of a sudden? We have to kind of keep going in this rat race. We have to keep doing what everybody else is doing, even though logically it doesn't really make sense. So I think this habit, this inertia, sunk cost fallacy, all of these things kind of are things that you see.
Just an example. I was in a training some while ago, and the guy said like he spent 20,000 euros, 80 people be in the room. 80 people, and I was thinking like the training was also about the finding yourself potential and what you want to do and how you can uncover your talents and whatever. So it's all about your personal growth. And I was thinking 20,000 only for advertisement, and we are like in the room there were only 80 people. Like how many he had some recordings or whatever, some materials, and they costed like 50 100 euros for recording.
Yeah.
I mean, how many he should sell to cover this costs for advertising? Okay. But this is really very old-fashioned model, and most people are still using it. I mean,
yeah,
this is.
And it's, I think, a little bit of fame, I think, right? Like people love to see themselves on the TV, like their brand or the big billboard, like your 5 minutes of fame. It's kind of exciting. But I think a lot of it is also sunk cost, right? Because if you've been doing this for 10 years or 5 years, and you have shareholders, right? And you've been explaining this cost for 5 years or 10 years, and then you're going to say, yeah, we replace our entire marketing department. Now there's only 1 or 2 people in marketing and there's a bunch of account managers and we've just changed the entire model. You kind of admit that the other one maybe wasn't so great. And also, of course, not for all business. For some business, it does work, right? There's also businesses who maybe spend 10 euros to acquire a customer and a customer makes him 12 euros. In this case, there's absolutely no problem. You can keep doing this. So I'm just talking about the business that I know, like the guy that you describe, where it is clearly broken in a sense. But I think there's a fear of changing the status quo, especially in this other way that takes more time to develop and you don't see the results. I've also worked for companies where we had rounds of applause for Facebook impressions, which is basically an equivalent of spending money and is absolutely not a metric, I think, to celebrate, because depends on what you're doing. Are you building a community? But if you're trying to sell something, you should look at sales and recurrence, and the impressions don't really matter. So it's kind of a cultural change, I think, as well.
Just, let's do a little remark. Impressions is how many people just seen your advertisement. And
yeah, so also, not really, not even. Impressions is not the same as exposure, right? Because I think there's, I don't know, is it ×3? I'm not sure, but the number of impressions, a lot of people might have an impression but haven't even seen your advertisement. So the word seeing kind of implies that they read it, right? And impressions is just that it's been shown to, like how many people did you throw it into their face? But maybe only a third of the people who had the impression actually were exposed to it and actually read, for who had actually registered, right? So yeah, also keep in mind.
But in terms of startups, because startups don't have so much money for advertising, what to do? What kind of tendencies? How to work? How to reach people? How to communicate with them?
So again, it depends so much on the model and what you're selling and who your target audience is, right? So that's why I would love to give all the answers here, but it really depends on what you're trying to do. Assuming that you're working with maybe some disruptive technology, right? Or you're doing something like what you're doing, what is more complicated. Like it's not for everybody, but I like also this model that I think you described, the 1,000 super fans, which is similar to the permission marketing, is where you start real one-on-one conversations almost with your customers. That doesn't mean that you have to sit there and type every single message, right? As I said in the beginning, you can still cluster your customers into cohorts and have them flow into different drip campaigns so that the conversation is pretty much automated. But I think the key is to kind of start a dialogue and give them something of value. That's why you see also a lot of people doing podcasts now. I will do a podcast myself as well, blogs, and of course with content that is super relevant to the target audience, not any content, but something really tailored for them, something original, something fresh, something they'll actually want to hear, right? So I think the point is to continuously deliver value to your customers so that they are willing to give you their attention, so that there's something in it for them.
Okay, so and now I would like to go to the end of the conversation. Could you give 3 tips to the people who would like to start their own business? How to find your target group, your audience?
Yes, I would start with outlining what you already have in your head, like really cleanly writing it out. So you can make some headers, things that you want to look at, where I would start with who are they? What do they value? What hurts? In what situation are they stuck? Do they talk to each other? Where do they convene? You know, some basic stuff. How high is the level of pain? So I would just outline all of that, because I think everybody I've talked to in the past few months had a lot of ideas, all kind of floating around. And I think just writing things down, it might be a boring exercise to you, but it's really helpful. And also to kind of expose what is your bias, maybe what things did you base on some research, right? And what things are just really gut feeling. So you can kind of distinguish between those. And based on that, you can create a plan, and prioritize a plan and how to approach these different target audiences and these different channels. Because a lot of people just have an idea and then run with it. I think the beginning is to outline what you're thinking so you can have a strategy about it. Because if you just run with it, you're also not measuring your results, right? Because you might have a campaign running and then you see a few clicks and then you change a word and you see a different number of clicks, but you're not really sure what parameter you're adjusting here. You know, you're not really sure what question you're answering for yourself. Are you checking whether your value proposition is wrong? Or are you checking whether they just need a bigger picture, right? So you need to be very aware of what you're trying to test now and prioritize what you're trying to do now. So that would be my key point of advice. Write things out, prioritize.
And third?
And third, test and adjust. Test, adjust, and connect with your customers as much as you can.
Yeah. Thank you so much, as it was very interesting to listen to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really lovely talking to you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.